This is your friendly neighborhood author, Jonathan, and you are listening to Season 4 of the Floor Rejects podcast, The Wells House Phenomenon. Hi, welcome back to the Floor Rejects podcast. Hi, welcome back to the Floor Rejects podcast. It's your friendly neighborhood reader, writer, philanthropist, journalist, meteorologist, depressed homosexual Jonathan. I'm here with you for Chapter 8 of the Wells House Phenomenon. Quick refresher, last week, Chapter 7, basically what we got was a culmination of 6.5 chapters of Warren beating around the bush, not telling anybody that he was queer as hell, until finally Lila figures it out and kind of, it seems like is like sicking Thomas in her place on Warren. Of course, Thomas starts to change the way that he looks, or Lila's changing it. We're not really sure yet, but they are working out on, what were they working on? I can't remember. Oh, remember he ran to town and he was texting that guy, the barber, and then he comes back and he's helping Thomas with like not really helping him, but he brings him some stuff, and Thomas is like, let's go take a dip in the swimming hole, which, like, on the real, if you're a queer man and a straight man asks you to go swimming, just the two of you in a beautiful private swimming hole, chances are he wants to put the moves on you, which is great. You know, we love to see it, love to hear it. But Thomas is like so awkward, uncomfortable that it doesn't really work. And then he kind of freaks Warren out, and Warren's like not about it. So that's kind of where we left off with Chapter 7. And where we left off was basically Warren being weirded out, trying not to make it weird, but in essence making it weird, and then going to sleep, kind of just not into it. And I believe Chapter 8 is it's Warren waking up in his dreams. So without further ado, let's get into Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is entitled Boundaries. Okay, so let's get into it. Then afterwards we'll have a quick chat about the chapter, because I wrote this one, and well, I write all of them, but I wrote this one and I really like a lot about it. So this goddamn remote, I don't like it sometimes. Chapter 8, Boundaries. When Warren's eyes open and take in the dream room around him, he has a new resolve. Now that he had 100% of his memory back, he pulled himself quickly in the bed, listening intently for signs of Thomas or Lila in the hall. The house is still, and Warren quickly sneaks into the bathroom, the bright light and white room blinding him for a moment. Tonight he has a strange, split-second thought where he kicks himself, feeling almost foolish for the way he had come out to Thomas, since he'd been shown just how okay Thomas was with him after the man had offered himself up the night before. But he let that go quickly, instead reminding himself that he was not in a good place at the moment, and these people, who he was still unsure were the enemy or were not at least something he should focus on. Looking in the mirror over the vanity, he can see a wild glare in his eye, and he can feel the presence of that figure again. It really seems to favor this room. He slowly turns to his left, out of reach of the mirror, and the figure hovers next to him silently, wavering around its edges. "Hey," he greets nonchalantly. The figure is no longer menacing. In fact, as Warren thinks, he had never been in any danger when only the figure was around. He thinks back to when he was stuck in the wall the figure had pulled him through, as well as the time he had gone over the balcony. Both times he realizes the figure had been moving Warren further from Thomas and Lila, as if trying to hide him from them. It seemed that the figure knew this was a dream, and that it was sentient. Warren began to shake as the full realization hits him. "You're protecting me, aren't you?" he asks it, and in response it drifts slowly towards the door, shifting through it as Warren begins to follow. He follows it out of the bedroom, then out of the front doors where it hovers near a light pole, and Warren can almost feel it being impatient. As he draws close, it floats around the side of the manor, heading back to the graveyard as Warren begins to speed up, remembering that last time he had lost the opportunity to see the face of the specter that had been leading him around. It is waiting for him when he arrives, panting and sweating even in the chilly pretend night. It stands next to the gravestone of his great-grandfather, the one who Warren now knew his Barty had come to replace. "What?" he asks, hoping that a simplistic question will lead to a first-ever simple answer. The figure does nothing at first, other than make the softest, almost imperceptible wheezing sound. Warren leans closer, thinking that maybe that would prompt a response. He can smell that rotten smell as he gets close, and as he looks deeper into where he thinks the thing's eyes must be, it utters 2 words followed by a wave of rank air. "Can't run." Echoes, whether in Warren's head or in the scope of this projected version of reality, he isn't sure, but it comes from the figure. "Can't run from what?" he asks, and as he waits for the answer, he hears voices and knows it must be the mother-son pair that haunted him day and night. The figure jerks away from Warren, moving at a pace faster than he could run. He chases it as he hears the voices coming closer, and he crashes into the thicket of trees he thought he had seen the figure disappear into. He stops, crouching low into the brush as he sees the pair crest the hill that the graveyard was tucked into. They were talking in hushed tones as if they knew Warren was watching. He can feel the figure come up behind him, the stench of it almost comforting as he watches. They stop at one of the gravestones, which one he isn't sure of in the darkness, and Lila produces a shovel, almost as if from the air, and begins to dig. He remembered this latest version of her as frail, but the feminine form in front of him dug rapidly with abandon. The only sound for minutes is the sound of her grunting and the dirt plodding behind her. Then she stops, leaning down and reaching into the hole she had dug to produce something. It looks like a box, and as she cracks the lid, her face is illuminated from a red light within. Warren slaps a hand over his mouth as he catches a view. He knows it has to be her. He could tell by the sound of her voice, which had remained pretty constant throughout her changes, only aging with her. Her face is wrinkled far more than it was in the day, her nose hooked up aggressively, her cheeks are hollow and sagging, and her hair is wispy, missing in patches from what he can tell, and pale white. As she shakes her head and smiles, her teeth are gnarled and there's way too many of them. Warren shifts uncomfortably, and a twig snaps under his foot. Her head whips towards the sound, and he sees and hears the box snap closed. Again, the two whisper at each other, this time more fervently and angrily than before, and he can see them drawing closer. Just as Warren considers bolting from the house, the figure phases through him, rushing at the pair, who seemed unsurprised but still wary. They stop marching towards him as the figure puts itself between his hiding place and them. "What? Spying on us? It does you little good. We already have you. I've told you this before." Lila sneers at it, shaking the box at the specter. It springs at them fast, expanding and morphing around the pair. He can hear them shouting, cursing in a language he didn't recognize as he sprinted from his spot behind the tree back farther and farther, now deeper in the forest edge closest to the manor. He can't hear them anymore, but he pushes on. As his blood rushes and his vision blurs, he realizes for a moment that he hadn't seen Thomas's face at the grave. That box had been just dim enough to keep him in the shadows. He stops in a clearing shrouded from the lower levels of the house, hoping he's still close and low enough that he will be able to see the spot from the attic just as he can feel the gentle vibrations of the black walls coming towards him. He knows this means he will wake up soon, and his mind is firing on overdrive. He scrambles to break large branches from trees, clearing the canopy as quickly as possible, not concerned with the noise he is making. As the clearing is filled with the bright moonlight, he grabs the biggest branch he can handle with his bare hands, ignoring the shards of wood cutting into his flesh and carve the ground under his bare feet. He looks down with satisfaction just as the moon is swallowed up and sees "Can't Run" carved crudely into the ground. He smiles as his vision goes black. He finally had a chance. He wakes up like he does every morning to the smell of breakfast being prepared for him, and he smiles, taking just a moment to indulge in feeling satisfied in having a staff on site that only catered to him, even if it was just 2 people. Then he feels pain shoot from his hands, and he sees small cuts and pinpoints all over his palms, and he can't seem to remember how he had hurt them. He examines the damage, unsure where it had come from, but sure that it would be something that would keep him more careful in the future. He dismissed the pain and mystery of his hands, engaging actively in being a more humane, level-headed man, and goes out to the kitchen, offering to help Lila with breakfast, knowing the old woman would refuse, even though her warped little body struggled to do most tasks. He hadn't said anything, as he could tell she was used to running the house, but he worried that in her old age she would push herself too hard for too long, since she was just used to it. Thomas joined them as Warren poured a second cup of coffee, and his mind, mostly dormant during the day, is still struck by the man's appearance, even though, to his controlled thoughts, he had seen the same person every day since he had arrived. Thomas's short black hair is mussed, cobwebs caught in the small coif. His olive skin is reddened from exertion, his thick eyebrows tinted white from dust. His thick, strong arms carry a large box, and as he sets it on the floor, his ample chest bounces. When he stands, he reaches up, stretching to reveal his rounded, hard-muscled stomach while he searches a cupboard for a coffee mug. He walks over and sits across from Warren, dusting himself off and running a hand through his short stubble. "Got all those rats out of the cellar, Mother," he says, his deep voice contradictory to the meekness of his tone. Lila wobbles over, her supremely white hair braided loosely down her back, shining as she moves to pat her son kindly on his broad shoulders. "Good boy, always quick to do what I ask," she murmurs, and Thomas appears uncomfortable as she touches him. Warren puts his coffee down and looks across the table at the pair. Lila was shaking, likely just from age, but he was struck by her frail stature. He hated to see a woman who appeared to be so overworked in her old age toiling away to make his life easier. He smiles at them. "I know this might be a little unorthodox, but would you guys be opposed to a bit of help? Maybe hire on a cleaning service or something? I just think you deserve some more downtime, Lila. You've been so kind, and I know how long you've cared for this house," Warren asks. Lila's wrinkled brow shoots up. No, you don't have to do that, Warren. You know I like caring for the manor. It just takes a little longer. And I wouldn't have anything to..." she protests, but Warren puts his hands up placatingly. "Okay, what if we just hired someone who could help sometimes? Like a handyman who just helps either of you when you need it? We wouldn't have to change our agreement at all, and maybe it just takes the pressure off of the two of you," he offers. Lila softens, a knowing look flashing across her face for a second before she looks at him sternly as her face could muster. I just don't think you should spend any of your money helping us. We want to help you, dear." Warren can tell by her voice that she's softening towards the idea. "I know, but I want to. I have the money, and think about it this way. It helps me knowing you guys aren't worked so hard, and it helps the manor stay in tip-top shape," he reasons, and she rolls her head slowly as she thinks. Thomas is shaking his head as he looks out the window. Warren's about to ask him what was wrong when Lila speaks. "I'm entertaining the idea, but do you think I might be able to make a suggestion when it comes to the person you hire?" she asks. Warren nods as her perception of choice in the matter, and she smiles. "In that case, I agree to your terms, and I know just the person to hire," she says, and Warren smiles, knowing that giving her this sense of control was all the old woman needed to give in. "I think you could hire Edward, my son. Well, my other son," she says, looking at Thomas, and Warren's eyes grow wide. I thought it was just the two of you. I had no idea you had another son, that Thomas had a brother," Warren exclaims, and Thomas snorts. "Half-brother," he mutters, and Lila smacks him on the head. He flinches, but sinks glumly into his chair. "I do. He's been away since the boys were young, with his father. In fact, I just tried to call him last night. I'll try again today. There were some, interference on the line," she says, and Thomas rolls his eyes as she dodders away down a hall towards the stairs. The two men are left in an uncomfortable silence. "I take it that Edward isn't your favorite person?" Warren asks carefully. Thomas looks at him, a bit guarded. "No, he is not. I'd hoped I wouldn't have to see him again." Thomas shivers. "Well, I can tell your mom not to call him. I'm sure she won't argue," Warren offers, and Thomas dismisses it with a wave. No, she'll just be a dog with a bone. It won't be as easy as you think it is to keep him away now that she's thought of it, he says. Warren digests this, considering asking Lila not to call him anyways, but knows that getting in the middle of a family issue was a bad idea. Well, since I am the boss, I guess I can make sure he doesn't get too out of line, Warren says, and Thomas huffs discontentedly, his chair scraping as he excuses himself to his chores. Warren heads back down to his room, but continues past it, past the main hallway and into a room he had recently come to love, which was a large library, a room just filled with dusty books and hardbound classics. There were shelves of books and curiosities on every wall, a small bar cart in the center which was mysteriously always freshly stocked, as well as several worn leather couches that seemed to be more recent, a more mid-century warm brown color set. He plops down at his favorite spot, pulling an old copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea from between the couch cushion and frame, and curls up with it. He tucks in, revisiting this favorite from his childhood until he's at the last few pages. He always hated finishing stories, TV shows, and movies. He set the book back down, content to leave the story unfinished. He already knew it, but it felt too final to close a book on the end. He wanders from the library, upstairs, checking in random bedrooms just to see what they looked like. He'd taken to doing this during the day, exploring random rooms that he had or hadn't seen before. He winds through the second floor, digging through long, empty bedside drawers in random suites, looking through the drawers of identical bathrooms. Then on the third floor he stops, finding a small room tucked in the far east wing. It was dusty, with cobwebs strung from the slanted, cracking ceiling. Warren pulls the string of a bare bulb, and the room is illuminated, the walls lined in shelves with cloudy, opaque jars, old boxes, and broken pieces of furniture. Warren ogles the small items near him, noting the thick layers of dust on everything. He has no idea what is in most of the unlabeled jars, and whatever is in them is hidden by the liquids around them. The boxes are also filled with junk, old burlap sacks, broken tools, and he's about to leave the closet when he spots a small box carved in dark mahogany wood in ornate designs. He picks it up, failing to notice that it's the only thing in the room not caked in grime. He tries to open it, pulling carefully at first, but when the lid doesn't budge, he pulls harder and harder until he finally gives up. He considers putting it back, but he finds the mystery of it intriguing, and he tucks it under his arm. He figured that whatever it was in his house and seemed to belong to him now. Whatever was in it was packaged well, as it doesn't rattle or shift. He makes his way up to the fourth floor, to the little studio room, determined to find a tool to get the thing open. He tries all the normal things he finds as he rifles through the small crafting bench. Hammer, screwdriver, and all do nothing, not even scratching the finish of the thing. He turns it over, and he runs his fingers over the smooth wood grain. He feels a slight irregularity. He can feel what seems to be letters, an inscription of sorts. He can't read it, and if the box had been engraved shallowly, then sealed and finished, it hid the name. He can't see any writing, and after rubbing the area slowly and carefully, failing to determine the letters, he has an idea. He grabs a piece of paper and a pencil from one of the benches, or many drawers, and carefully makes a rubbing of that area. He pulls the paper up to the window and lets out a disappointed sigh. What the hell is this? Must be some sort of weird logo, he mutters to himself, looking down at the rubbing, which appeared to just be random triangles and lines arranged to look like writing. He dropped the box on the bench, looking out the window absently as he wonders if he'd found anything of meaning. He stares out at the expanse of his property, noticing after a minute the dip in the tree line. Not a jagged or patchy thing, but an area where the canopy was simply missing. He feels a tingling in the cuts in his palms, and he heads downstairs to investigate, leaving the box and rubbing in his room on the way out. As he walks towards where the clearing is, he can feel a mounting sense of dread, or something like it, coiling in his stomach for no known reason as he draws near the trees. He crosses into the woods, and the air grows cooler, stale and still as he pushes forward through the mysterious patch of earth that he knew was somehow there. He keeps on, fighting brambles, twisting vines, and biting flies until he draws into the clearing that felt inexplicably familiar. He walks around, finding branch after branch snapped from the trees in the area, as if something or someone had pulled them all down. He notices as the branches all point towards the center of the clearing, and when he looks down and sees it, the message he had left himself, now smeared from his own clueless steps during the day, he pauses. He reads under his breath confusedly, just as a searing pain rips through his head. He cries out, falling hard against a splintered tree stump. Flashes, like stills from a reel of an old film, pop into his mind for split seconds. He can see the clearing, but it's dark. He sees a dark figure. His mind feels as if it's coming apart at the seams as he catches glimpses of Lila, her face bathed in red light. Then the last image. He sees the same spot on the ground, but without his shoe prints marring it. "Can't run," he yelps, clutching at the sides of his head, pressing on it, willing the pain to pass, but it doesn't. Instead, he faints, slamming headfirst into a large stone lodged in the ground. He wakes as the sun is setting on the manor. In the dim light, he opens his eyes as the sound of Thomas and Lila calling his name penetrate his calm. He tries to lean up, gain traction, and get up, but the world tilts, his entire body shaking violently as he tries to pull himself from the dirt. Their voices are distant, Thomas' deep voice drowned out by the shrill panic in Lila's. He tries to return their shouts, but his voice is hoarse and his throat is impossibly dry. His forehead feels strangely stiff, and he touches it, pulling his hand back to find it smeared in blood and dirt. He can't manage to get a firm grip on the world, and he knows there's no way he can find his way out of the forest on his own. He groans, half an idea in his mind as his nausea threatens to overtake him. He fishes limply in his pocket, pulling his phone up to his face. He squints at the bright screen, pressing the flashlight button until he sees the camera flash start to strobe. He holds it weakly in front of him, hoping they would see it in the dying sunlight, but his arms useless and give out, leaving him face down in the dirt, his eyes closing again as he hears the duo yelling in the distance. He comes to the second time as he feels someone shaking him. His eyes roll open, glazed over and bloodshot. He can hear the muddled sound of Lila yelling, and then he can feel someone pull him up off the ground. As he is hoisted up, he can make out a blurry vision of Thomas's face bobbing above his own. Put me down, Warren protests, pushing feebly against Thomas's hard-muscled chest. Warren, don't bother. You're not walking anywhere, he can hear Thomas say, the man's chest vibrating against Warren's bloody ear. Careful with him, Lila snaps. Her voice has a hard edge to it. It almost sounds to Warren as if Thomas growls in response, his powerful arms tightening around Warren, who promptly falls back into unconsciousness as he watches the stars swim above Thomas's head. Warren. Warren hears Thomas's voice whispering his name, and he opens his eyes. The day comes rushing back to him with complete clarity, as well as the rest of his memories. This was new. Thomas was already here, his strong face willing Warren's view. Warren tries to draw back, but Thomas clamps down on his shoulders firmly. Don't move, Warren. You're hurt, Thomas orders. Warren stills as the man leans forward. His face is so close that Warren can feel the breaths coming out of his nose as he examines the cut on Warren's face. What happened to you out there? It looked like a tornado landed on top of you, Thomas asks, and Warren holds back, leaning into disorientation and away from giving Thomas any information he didn't have. Well, whatever it was, it looks like it got the better of you, Thomas says, tracing a finger across a scrape on Warren's neck. Yeah, I don't feel so hot, Warren mumbles. He can feel that the left side of his face is swollen. Sorry, but you don't look it either, Thomas says quietly, and Warren laughs, but quickly clutches at his side as a dull ache spreads up from his waist to his arm. Thomas's eyes grow wide. He begins to pull at the edges of Warren's shirt, and Warren slams his arms down with a hiss of pain. Warren, I need to make sure it's not serious. You look like you lost a bad fight, Thomas says. Warren relents, making a snide remark about seeing the other guy as his shirt falls to the floor. He looks down and sees a deep red and purple bruise running up his ribs. Thomas places a hand on it, and his palms are so wide that it spreads the length of Warren's rib cage. The injured man groans. Thomas grimaces. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure nothing's broken, Thomas says, and Warren hums angrily as Thomas massages his ribs. It feels okay. I don't think anything is cracked, Thomas says, but as he runs his hand under the lowest rib, Warren yelps in pain, arching off the bed towards Thomas, who wraps his bare chest up in an automatic reaction. Warren, even in his mentally complete form, is in too much pain to immediately reject the comfort, and is just vulnerable enough that the feeling of Thomas's warm, calloused palms on his back causes his blood to start rushing. He knows he'll have a much more intimate issue to deal with if Thomas doesn't stop touching him, and he was just too exhausted to mince words. Thomas, I need to lean back, Warren says quietly, pulling away. Thomas has a strange expression, half dejected, half relieved. Warren can feel the stress and weight of the day crashing down on him, even in his dream. I should probably stay with you, try to keep you up and make sure you don't fall asleep again, Thomas says, offering it uncomfortably, knowing exactly what he was really offering, and Warren, too tired and now in too much pain to filter himself or hide the fact that his memory was intact, looks at Thomas wearily. How could you keep me awake, Thomas? I'm already asleep, Warren says, and Thomas looks at him confusedly, touching his forehead lightly and looking in his eyes, searching for signs of a concussion. Warren laughs. He can hear the delirium of pain and frustration welling up, knowing that his day self had been so close to his hint before he'd passed out, unsure whether he would remember it once he woke up. What are you talking about, Warren? Thomas looks at him with confusion. Warren feels that electrifying feeling of realization that he had said too much. Nothing, Thomas. I don't think you need to stay with me. I don't think I could handle it, Warren says, and Thomas shakes his head, slipping from the room as Warren's lids grow heavy. He closes them, sure that he would just wake up in another dream, but too tired and sore to fight it. Fat lot of luck. No memory and all the pain when I'm awake. All the memories plus the pain when I'm asleep. I hate it here, Warren mutters as he falls asleep within his dream. All right, I will admit it. There were some clunky parts in the chapter. I will also admit that I think I only have to make one cut. I only messed up right in the very beginning of that. I mean, I messed up a few times, but I'm just going to glaze over it. You'll hear them. But I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to cut them apart and splice everything together because you still get the idea of it. If you're just listening, I think you kind of are, if you've been here a while, used to the cadence of how I talk. If you're watching, the words are going down the screen so you can read along or fast forward or rewind if you hear something that's a little weird. And the other thing is I'm thinking I might not put a bunch of background music behind the reading. I was listening to, what was it? It was the Let's Not Meet podcast. And he reads Let's Not Meet stories, and I really like it because it's ominous and it's scary, and I can listen to it during the day and feel safe. But I don't think he usually puts much background music behind his reading. Now, from what I can tell by his audio quality, he is in like a padded room. Like he has got no possible sound interference. I unfortunately do not have that luxury. As you can see behind me, bare walls. The things in this room that absorb the most sound is the one rug and some glass boxes with some reptiles in them. So that's why I usually put music behind me reading. But I was really enjoying, even if there's background sounds when I'm listening to someone read, it does feel a little bit cleaner, I think, to just hear the words and not be distracted by the background music. You can always let me know if you do not feel that way. You can tweet me at The Floor Rejects or email me if you want to be a little more private. Doesn't really matter to me. No one has ever done it except one time my sister sent me an email to tell me to keep up the good work. And that was very sweet of her. But let's get to this chapter. So chapter 8 is kind of the continuation of Thomas awkwardly trying to make moves on Warren, very half-heartedly. It's like not clear why he's doing it because he obviously doesn't want to, but he keeps doing it. But here's the fun part. We've now introduced Edward into this story. Originally, it was always just going to be these three characters. I was never going to introduce another character. There was never going to be, I thought about there being like a love interest for Warren to kind of out him to the duo, but that failed. But then I got this idea to bring in kind of a new person once they've established their relationship, someone who serves a similar function to the other two, to Thomas and Lila, but kind of is the best of both of them when it comes to Warren, if that makes sense. We'll get into it when he shows up, because he is showing up, I believe, in the next chapter. But we introduce Edward, just the idea of him right now. There's also the box that Warren finds, and we're not going to focus on Edward right now. We'll focus on him next week, because I think he'll be an interesting foil for Thomas specifically, and maybe Lila, but Thomas really. Let's talk about the box. So here's the thing, is originally I was going to transcribe the inscription of what the box actually says. Unfortunately, the language that I would be using is a dead language. It's cuneiform, and there are no fonts for that. So what I had to do is basically describe cuneiform, or these two words specifically in cuneiform, and they do look like triangles with lines on them. So that's what that means, because there is no font, there is no way to just type it out. Of course, if it was like a paperback book or a digital version of the book, or, just an actual physical copy of the story, you might be able to insert like a graphic or a specialized font just for those words. Cannot do that, unfortunately, with iMovie or with an audio version. And I do usually use iMovie to edit. I have Photoshop, Illustrator, all the, Procreate. Is it Procreate that I use? I think so. Let me check. Let me make sure. No, Premiere Pro. I have all those. I don't like Premiere Pro. I find that it crashes. It's really clunky. There's so many options that mean absolutely nothing, and you can never get anything done. So I usually use iMovie, and I don't know why it's slow like that. But back to the chapter. So Thomas obviously is not happy that Edward's going to show up. Warren finds this box, and he can't get it open. He sets it in his room. He forgets about it. That's going to come back and play into the story later. Of course it will. While I was writing it, I was trying to think of loose ends that I haven't tied up yet as we move into the second part of the story, where Warren kind of gets all of his information together. And the only thing we haven't tied up is that, you remember when he gave gifts to Lila and Thomas in chapter 2 or 3, and he gave Thomas that pocket watch, and Thomas was so enthralled by it? I know why he is, and I know what the significance is of it. The only problem is I haven't had a space to bring that back. So don't think I'm forgetting about it. It'll come back. It's not going to be like a plot line I just forget about. But besides that, I think we're tying up a lot of the loose ends, and in the next couple of chapters, as we move into the second part of this story, we'll tie up more loose ends. But the box is just something we're going to forget about for a chapter or two. The figure is also interesting, the dark figure. And there's only so many words for it. Again, when you're reading something, duplicate terms just kind of, you read over them and don't realize how duplicated they are. But when you're speaking them, especially something you're not familiar with reading yourself, sometimes it gets a bit tedious. But the dark figure, the specter, the thing, it still has not revealed itself. It almost did a couple of chapters ago, and I think once it does reveal itself, it's going to be kind of like a weird thing, to a weird reveal, but it'll make more sense later. And there's another thing that I want to bring back into the story, and it is the truck and trailer. The reason I want to bring it back, unrelated to the Spectre, is I think the truck and trailer can play a bigger part in what Thomas and Lila are kind of hiding from Warren. I just haven't figured out exactly the way to put them into the story, or to put those objects into the story and have their revelations make sense. So I'm going to bring them back as well. But the clearing, I like that part of this chapter. I think it's interesting that, a couple of chapters ago, or maybe the last chapter, Warren tries to just write himself a note. And that proves impossible because all of the kind of traditional ways of writing notes, of leaving himself messages, his phone, paper, pen, those types of things are gone. He can't leave himself a traditional message. Originally, I thought, what if he just left himself a message in like the steam from the shower? But that wouldn't work. I thought, oh, that'll tie the bathroom in, but that won't work. And then I thought, what if he writes himself a message in blood? And then I thought, that's a little bit weird. And then I thought, what if he left himself a message that was almost like, also, if he left himself a message in blood, Thomas and Lila would just find it, right? It's too obvious. So Warren is trying to be smart when he leaves himself this message in the forest, in which he's thinking, will I be able to see it from the house when I'm, not in my full state? Will I be able to understand it when I'm not in my full state? Will I reach it? He doesn't know, but he knows that if he leaves the message way out here and just hopes that he sees it, because Lila has made it clear that they don't really go into that attic room. It's just not somewhere they go for some reason, which will come back later. We understand that this is the only way he can do it. He has to use things in the environment that exist and have to exist for him to kind of understand what's happening in his dreams as a kind of reality. Like, it doesn't matter if his phone doesn't work in his dreams, or if there's no paper and pencils or ways to leave himself a note easily in his dreams, right? Those aren't essential to a cohesive and believable dream reality. But trees, dirt, forest are. And what I also kind of want to point out that I'm proud of myself for doing is establishing between chapter 7 and chapter 8 that what happens to him in the dreams happens in real life. So like him getting splinters in his hands, that happened in his dream world, but it happened to him also in real life. And then that kind of opened the door so that when he carved can't run into the ground, that it would still exist within the real world reality. And what we haven't yet understood is his dream world a different world, or is his dream world the same world that he's actually living in, just altered somehow? It's going to be very interesting once, I know what happens. I know whether it's actually his world or if it's just like an alternate reality that he's existing in. But once I reveal it, and I'm still working on how to reveal it and how to make it all kind of make sense, and to not just be like, I don't know, like cliche or, so difficult and obscure to figure out. Because I hate when you're watching a movie or watching a TV show when something is so obscure, so difficult to figure out that you just don't figure it out. Oh, my friend's calling. Hello? I don't remember where I was. Oh, so I'm trying to figure out how to make it so that we're not, that everything is plausible. And I hate when I'm watching shows, like most shows when I watch them and the answer to who done it is so convoluted and complicated that it like doesn't make sense. That's annoying to me, because the point of a story being told to you, and there's exceptions to the rule, like abject horror movies, sometimes those sorts of reveals are good. They're not very often good. Most of the time they're just annoying, but sometimes they're good. Murder, She Wrote is another example of kind of that format that works, where in order for you to know who did it, you really just have to take a wild stab in the dark, because most of the time, unless you're really, really, really watching it, you're not going to get it. So I'm trying to make it so that this story is not like that, so that we're not going through the story looking for the answers as we go, and then once we get to them, like there were no hints throughout the story. I don't know. I'm trying to toe the line between treating the reader, listener, you, not you specifically, but, treating the generic reader or listener as, I don't know how to say it without it sounding kind of assholey. Not treating them as if they are, but treating the reader as the smart person that they are, as the person who can use their own deductive reasoning enough that I don't have to spell everything out, but I also don't want to make it like impossibly hard for the reader or listener to figure out, because that's not fun either. Like, why would you listen to 30 chapters of a story when you know that the only time you're going to figure out what happens is at the end? You would just listen to the beginning and the end. You wouldn't listen to it all the way through trying to figure out who done it before you're told who done it, or what done it, or what's actually happening. There's a bug. Ew. I'm always afraid when I'm reading that a bug is going to fly in my mouth and you're going to see it and I'm not going to see it. But I like that. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. When it comes to Thomas's appearance, I'm just going to come out and say it. I mean, Warren has like a thing for older, distinguished men. And Thomas kind of picked up on that when he saw the sexy photos from the barber in the last chapter. And so his appearance changes once again. He's now got black hair and he's super buff and big titties, which we love to see. You know what I mean? Very much dad bod vibes, very much, but like real dad bod vibes. Not like I have abs, but they're like a little bloated dad bod. I'm talking like barrel chested, like round, like strong, but round. Do you know what I mean? Not quite so big ab muscles and tight V. That's not fun. It's 2020. Let's get rid of that. Let's normalize actual bigger bodies. So Thomas hasn't fully morphed into that, but he's kind of shifting towards it because he's getting more hints from maybe from Lila, from what she's seen, and from Warren himself, because we also don't know how much they're learning while he's actually asleep, like when he's unconscious, in between when he's dreaming, when he's awake, because there's no clear passage of time. Sometimes he's awake for 20 minutes, it seems like, and sometimes he's awake for hours. But let's talk briefly about Lila and Thomas in the woods before he runs away from them. Lila digs up this box. This box is from a grave. He's assuming it glows red. I think you can kind of pick up that this is the way that she contacts Edward, because she says the next day kind of nonchalantly but also sneakily, like, oh, I tried to talk to him yesterday, but there was some interference, aka the ghostly figure. So I like this chapter. I like this ending part. It's not my favorite way to end a chapter, where it's like awkward and uncomfortable. Also, originally, where it says, what does it say? Thomas is touching Warren, and it says he knows that he will have a much more intimate issue to deal with if Thomas doesn't stop touching him. Originally, I just wanted to say he knew he would have an erection if Thomas kept touching him. Couldn't say that, didn't feel right. Then I tried it with knows he will be at full salute in a moment if Thomas doesn't stop touching him. That didn't feel right either, so I just said have a much more intimate issue. Phrasing like that, I don't love it, but I also don't want to be like so explicit that it's needless, because we'll get there. We always get there when it comes to things that I write. But I like that, number one, Thomas is like caring for Warren. It seems like he actually kind of genuinely cares, but isn't really trying to like push himself on Warren in the same way that Lila is. And I like that at first Warren is like, I'm not going to give up that I know what's going on. And then by the end of it, he accidentally gives up that he knows what's going on. And Thomas is just kind of like, ooh. That's going to come into play later. And I'm excited for that. But we'll stop talking about it for now. I do want to tell you guys quickly before we go, if you're just listening to this and you do not care about any sort of video content, you don't care about like other stuff besides the podcast, like if you don't like furniture, if you don't like design, if you don't like DIYs and stuff like that, you can tune out. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. If you're here, if you're watching this, or if you're interested in things like DIY, furniture restoration or furniture flipping or painting or just kind of upcycling, I am working on a video. I recently was gifted a well-used desk and chair. The project is already done, but I'm working on trying to edit it all together because I've never shot anything like that, much like I had never shot anything like this. I'm working on a video kind of in that scheme of things. So if you like mid-century modern, if these buzzwords get you tickled, keep an eye out. Mid-century modern, Scandinavian design, simplicity. I'm just describing IKEA. Pink, blue, gender reveal. Ooh, not gender reveal, but just like the gender dichotomy within pink and blue. Gold, paint, sanding, polyacrylic. If those interest you, stay tuned because I'm working on putting that video together. Because when I watch DIY videos, I had this question when I was originally about to redo this desk. My question was just, can you use latex paint on laminate? And I could not get a simple answer. So I want to make a video that answers simple questions like that when it comes to DIYing with laminate furniture or with using latex paint or sanding. I just want to make a simple video that answers those questions. So keep an eye out for that. But I believe I hear people outside and it's just going to get louder. So I'm going to say goodbye for this week. I appreciate you listening. Thank you for listening this whole year. I know this is the last episode of the year, so I appreciate it. I'll see you in the new year, and I would like to say on this last episode, the last thing I'd like to say this year is please remember that Black Lives Matter, Black trans lives matter, and that we need to defund the fucking police. Also, like 17 other things, like end ICE, support like the Okra Project, support the bail funds, any bail funds that are left at this point. Keep supporting Black-led organizations, small Black businesses. Keep listening if you're an ally. Keep listening. Keep in mind how to listen and how to be a good ally. And remember that going into 2021, even if you've kind of pumped the brakes on being quite so vocal on the internet or vocal in person or doing whatever you felt you needed to do, keep in mind that we need to carry that into 2021, because I know even I have kind of stepped back from the internet when it comes to activism, or like I've started to feel like an armchair activist. And so I did a lot more investment in educating myself more and figuring out where I stand in things. And that's just as important as doing things vocally or doing things in front of the curtain versus behind the scenes. So as we end 2020, keep all that in mind. Keep in mind to keep taking care of yourself, take care of the people around you, look out for them, be safe. Not to say that I love you guys, but like, for those of you that have really stuck around with me through this, all the iterations, all the changes, all the weird shit, all the audio issues, I really appreciate, like, not to be that guy, but I really appreciate it. I know there's not like a lot of us, but I appreciate it. It's been really nice to know, even if I don't know who you are, it's been nice to feel like there's one or two or three other people out there who think like I do, or who like the same things that I do, or who think what I'm doing is original, because the whole premise of it was to do what I didn't see in the world that I wanted to see in the world, to entertain in the same way that I wanted to be entertained. So I appreciate it as always. Remember, Black Lives Matter. Keep an eye out for that video when it comes to furniture flipping, because I'm really just like throwing everything at the wall, all of my interest in seeing what sparks the most joy. And I'll see you in 2021. Now let's see if we can get this. Oh, shit. Sorry. Let's see if I can get this remote to start working. Anyways, let's see. Bye.